Welcome to TINAH Talks, where time is not a healer, but we believe that we all have the power to heal ourselves and take our mental well being into our own hands. This podcast is a byproduct of TINAH, the mental well being marketplace and community platform at timeisnotahealer.com, providing you with the best products for your self healing journey. Hit subscribe and follow us on socials if you want support on your mental well being journey. We're your hosts. I'm Kelsey. This is Sophie. And this episode is all about focus and how we deal with focusing better in hard times and how our mental health affects our focus and all that good stuff. Um, so I guess to get started, I mean, I'm sure you've heard the whole statement where focus goes, energy flows. Have you heard that before?
I have, and I think it's funny, isn't it? Because it's like, okay, our energy wants us to be focusing, but no, it takes us off into a different direction. And actually, you're right. Like anything that we focus intently, we're signaling that that's where all of our focus and our attention is going. So if we're on like a little scroll hole, then obviously our energy and attention is going on our procrastination rather than the task at hand. But like I think it's so much easier said than done to
Yeah.
focus where you want your energy to be.
Yeah, it definitely is. I mean, so there's this concept in the psychology field. It's called our reticular activating system. And basically, this is like our tiny little filter that filters the things that we pay attention to, like what we consciously will give our focus to. So I've talked about this. I don't know if I've talked about on this podcast, but way back in the day, because I know you're like around my age when we didn't have cell phones, we were walking around with a little computer in our pocket, but like let's say you were thinking about, oh, I need to get a new I need to get a new car, or I want this particular type of car. Now, all of a sudden, everywhere you go, you see that car. And then all of a sudden you notice like um a car lot that's selling vehicles that has a bunch of those cars in it. And you're like, was that always there? Like, I never noticed it before. And what that is when we decide that like we're focusing on a particular aspect, right? Like are focusing on that specific type of car or wanting that car, our reticular activating system then starts filtering things from our environment that allows us to see opportunities to actually obtain that thing or to engage more with that thing that we're giving focus to. And so that's where like that little filter comes in. And I think, right, if we're focused on a lot of the uncomfortable things that have happened in our life, and this conversation isn't meant to negate our experiences or dismiss our negative and uncomfortable feelings to like just avoid them and focus on positivity. That's not what it is. It's more so about the fact that like sometimes we get caught up if we're focusing on everything like the things that are going wrong, all we're going to see in like everyday situations is stuff that keeps going wrong versus like focusing on, oh, I might have room for opportunity with this new approach, or I might be able to do this new thing, or I would like to try this new thing, and seeing like our reticular activating system is going to filter out, okay, here's an opportunity to do that, or here's greater opportunities for this. And I think that's where that whole sentiment of like where focus goes, energy flows. And I don't know if you've had experiences like that, but
Definitely. I think it's funny you say about like you can walk the same street loads of times and you suddenly start noticing like the car dealership. I used to
yeah.
do that all the time. Like when I used to live with my parents quite a few years ago now, but I used to live with my parents and I've lived there what, like 23 years, whatever. And then I randomly would come home one day from work and be like, did you paint the hallway? And they'd be like, yes, Sophie, like 6 months ago. And they're like, where is your attention? And
Yeah.
the other example of that is like when you let's say you just broke out with someone and suddenly you start seeing on social media everyone's getting married, everyone's got a new boyfriend, everyone's hard launching their new relationship
Yeah.
on media. It's like because you're actively thinking about something, you're so much more prone to like notice things that are happening around you
In
that
that realm.
are associated with that. And it's like again, like if you start thinking about like I think I definitely am guilty of like going into little negative thought patterns sometimes, and I can 100% see that when I am in one of those negative thought patterns, everything just happens. It all just feels like everything's crumbling down around me, and I'm like, oh my god, what is happening? I can't cope. But then because I'm stuck in that I can't cope thought pattern, obviously more and more shit presents itself because I'm asking for it, I'm attracting it. Whereas if I can like do some work around, like, do you know what? Let's compartmentalize this. Like, this isn't as bad as it sounds. Like, this to-do list actually isn't as long as I think it's going to be, and start focusing on like, okay, it's all like, this is achievable, this is doable. Then it starts feeling easier and it starts flowing. And I can definitely sense that when I'm in a bad headspace or a negative thought pattern, the world goes to shit. But when I'm in like a not a positive headspace, but when I'm in a more of a mindful headspace, and I'm like really looking at a situation for what it actually is, not what my brain is telling me it's catastrophized to be, things go in a lot easier. And that's in all areas of my life.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's a feedback loop, right? Like, if you're focused on like uncomfortable negative things, then that's what your filter in your system is going to filter more into your processing, and then it continues to feed into that negative mindset, that the uncomfortable feelings that you have. If you're focused on more mindful positive opportunities, that's what your filter is going to bring in from your environment for you to process and see, and then filter and then feed into that feedback loop. And it like kind of makes me think about, right, like why sometimes certain mental health issues, they're really tricky, right? Like, depression isn't something that you just get out of. And like, when you're stuck in that mindset, it's so hard to move out of, like, you can't just think positively out of it. That's not what it is. But I do think what we're actively trying to focus on does influence it to a certain degree. And it always makes me think of the Kung Fu Panda quote, which is like my favorite, which is, right, yesterday is history. And that's a lot of like, when we're depressed, it means that we are focusing on the past. We're stuck thinking in the past and the uncomfortable feelings that came with those experiences. So, and then anxiety comes from worrying about the future and the things we can't control. And so the quote is, yesterday is history, today. Damn it, I'm butchering it. Okay, wait. So it's, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, but today is a gift, and that is why it's called the present. And I think when we are focused on being mindful in the present moment, that's when things feel better. At least for me, like, I'm an incredibly anxious person, so I struggle with anxiety on a daily basis, and I can tell when I get into that trap of thinking about like everything that I have to do or everything that's potentially to come, and I don't know how it's going to go, and the stuff that's out of my control. And if I keep thinking in that way, it like feeds into that route. But like, when I scale it back and I just say, okay, I write down the things that I know that like are to come, and I can put that in a safe place on a piece of paper over here and just focus on right now. Like, what are my next couple steps ahead of me? I feel much better. Like, that my energy doesn't feel as chaotic and overwhelming. And being that I'm also prone to depression and I've had major depressive episodes in my life, I know that like, when I get stuck on, even without a major depressive episode, like if I'm struggling with grief, or grieving the loss of my parents and things like that, it's when I start ruminating on like the past experiences that had happened that I can't change. And there's like so many feelings that come with it that, like, even if I wanted to change it, I can't. And then I like get stuck there. But if I, address my feelings, I allow myself to have that moment, but try to like remove my focus from that. And I try to just stay, where am I at now? What can I control now? What can I do for myself right now? That that always makes me feel 110% better, which, as my boyfriend would say, that doesn't exist. But that number doesn't exist. It's only 100%. But yeah, I don't know. Do you feel the same way with like, if you get caught thinking in the past versus the future, or being like mindful in the present?
Yes, 100%. What I do struggle with, and you can tell me how you do this, but what I really struggle with is trying to figure out, because I think when I am in a little hole, and I'm in my shit, and like I'm trying to process all my emotions. Again, I've said this before, I'm a very self-aware person, so I know that that is not where I need to be to attract the
Yeah.
things that I want to attract, because they're like, let's say for example, I'm worried about money. Me worrying about money and sitting there thinking about all my attention, all my focus on money, not being grateful for like bringing in like even a little bit of money, or like not focusing on like the fact that actually I could be fine with money. It's just that I'm forward thinking about my money woes. Like I
Right.
really struggle to sit and think like, how can I sit and absorb the fact that I am worried, because you want to register the emotion, right? Like, so worry is the feeling that I'm feeling, fear is the feeling that I'm feeling, but how do I then sit with that emotion but also suck myself out and try and get back to the present moment? That's the bit that I really struggle with. It's like living in the moment
Yeah.
and thinking about like the present moment and the present time, but also sitting with the emotion of the fear. Like, how do you navigate that? I don't know, from your experiences, like how have you navigated being present and like trying to take yourself
Yeah.
back to this moment and be like, do you know what, right now you're okay, like you don't need to feel all those fears and the worries that you're thinking about in 6 months time or whatever, but equally you need to sit with that feeling of the fear and work your way through it. That's the bit that I'm really struggling with, and I've been thinking about that a lot recently. How do you manage those two things?
Yeah, gosh. Well, I guess this is like a really great place to say that it's like a great reminder is that focus is whether you're focusing on allowing yourself to feel the uncomfortable emotions and then focusing on shifting out of that and into the present moment. A great reminder is that focus is a mental muscle that needs to be worked, right? So I would say personally for myself, if you go back 10 years, I was absolute crap at like being able to do that shift mindfully. Be like, okay, allowing myself to feel the uncomfortable things. Now, how do I shift out of it? I think what we do when we don't have the awareness or the skills in our toolbox to know how to work that mental muscle and how to shift things, we tend to just avoid, right? We distract. So we then don't allow ourselves to ever actually feel the emotions that we need to feel. And we divert our attention elsewhere and we focus, we like throw ourselves into things where we don't have to think about it. But that always ends up coming back to bite us in the ass, right? Like later on, we end up blowing up and bubbling over because we didn't address things that needed to be addressed. But I think it's it's literally a muscle that you just have to practice. Like you have to be aware enough of recognizing, "Oh, I'm actually having a really hard time right now." So what typically works for me when I'm having a hard time? Well, I know I need to feel the emotion, so what can I do for that? I'm gonna go cry in the shower. I'm gonna go put some music on and like angry dance it out. What is it that you need to do? Like shut down and maybe it is like watch an episode or give yourself a day to just binge watch things and like cry at the TV, whatever it is, but it's about having that awareness and practicing that mental muscle of like, oh, what is happening right now? And being able to label your feelings. That's a practice, like learning how to label your feelings every day and in different moments. And then when you're making that shift, knowing, okay, when I'm trying to shift out of this like spiral, what are the things that help pull me out of it? So I'll give a really good example. My cortisol has been pretty high. I've been pretty stressed out. And so my anxiety is really high. And I could tell because even though I'm someone I love my sleep, when going to bed, I'm exhausted, but then it's really hard for me to shut my brain down and go to sleep. And then I start spiraling in my thoughts and I start thinking about a lot of other things. There's all sorts of like tools that are recommended out there. Like, okay, well, what do you do in this moment? A lot of people I've recommended like word vomit journaling where you just write down everything you want to get out of your head. For me, I don't necessarily need to journal about those things. Like this is all past stuff where like I've got a handle on it in terms of like talking about it in therapy or whatever. I don't want to sit here and like write it out. It's more for me, I need to shift my focus to get out of my monkey mind brain of like what's bringing up all these fears and these old distressing moments and things. And so I've started going back to reading. I'll pull up my book, I'll put my little book lamp on, and I'll read for like 10. I don't put a time limit, but I try to do like 10 to 20 pages. And hands down, every time by the end of it, my focus has shifted, my body has decompressed, and like now I'm able to like kind of fall asleep, not thinking about things. But I had to learn how to do that. I didn't know how to do that years ago. It was a skill that I had to learn how to like shift my focus and reset. Where am I trying to refocus things? There's a lot of good techniques like breath work or tapping. Like if you're having like you're stuck in certain things, like your focus on, you can think about it to like tap through it in your body, and then you can try to shift your focus to a different thought and tap that through and try to like shift your energy. Um but yeah, I think it's different from person to person, and it's being able to like, I don't know, I'm a big advocate of, I tell people like these are all skills we need to learn whether you're in a good mood or you're in a bad mood. So these aren't things that you can just whip out and do when you're in a bad place because you're already struggling. So it's about trying to learn these things about yourself and put them into practice when you are in a good place, because you can practice it and you can do it so that it's there when something bad happens, you know you can lean into that because you've been practicing that skill. That's how I would describe it. I
Yeah,
mean,
that makes sense. You're right. It needs to be something that you're practicing constantly. It can't just be like a toolbox that you whack out when you are feeling a bit low or anxious or something. And it's, as much as I think that's what people would like, that you just
mhm.
have this cure. That's just not how it works. You're right. It's a muscle. The brain is a muscle. It needs to be treated like a muscle. And it's the same as if you were training your legs. Like you want to
Right.
grow your glutes, for example. Well, what do you need to do to grow the glutes? You need to be consistent in your squats. You need to be doing like X, Y, Z, like warming them up before you go into a full workout, etc. So it's the same thing, like how you would treat your body, grow a muscle and like train a muscle in your body. You also need to be training that muscle in your brain as well, and
Yeah.
not expecting your brain to, like, the first time you do a squat, it's going to be a shit squat, isn't it? Like you're not going to know the
Yeah.
form, you're not going to have the right form, and that feels a bit painful, uncomfortable, a bit embarrassing in the gym maybe. But you keep practicing that squat. You go light at the beginning, then you get heavier and heavier and heavier, and you build up your resistance to the squat and the weight. And that's exactly the same thing you need to do with your brain. It's like what can I do to train my brain to build
Resilience.
resilience? Yeah, exactly, resilience to things that are out of your control, because naturally they're the things that feel scary. The things that you're in control of don't feel as scary. You don't need as much resistance or training because you know how to manipulate those situations. But the things that are out of your control, that's where the anxiety comes from. And I think that's
Yeah.
the bit that you need to work on. Like, and the issue is you only really know how to build that resilience once you've been through it, right? So I think that
Yeah.
that's also a bit of a challenge. The first time you're navigating something, a new feeling or a new emotion, that's when it can really feel like it's out of your control, and you don't really know how to focus the attention on actually not fixing, but supporting yourself through the problem.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think it starts with that immediate awareness, right? Like being able to recognize, to identify, is this within my control or is this out of my control? And like, how is it making me feel? And then from there, you move forward.
And like, what
Um,
examples would you give of things that are out of our control?
like out of our control. Well, I mean, like the things that are out of our control, right? Like how other people treat us, other people's expectations of us, family dynamics and behaviors, or friends, or work, work acquaintances, or just people at work, things that are in the past or things that are in the future, and just other people's reactions in general. And so I think there's a lot of things that like come into play about what you focus on within your control, but like learning how to, I think, building up your self-worth as a person, seeing your value and seeing what it is no matter what outside influences are, right? Like I could get into a fight with a friend and they can have a certain expectation of me that I'm not able to meet. That doesn't make me any lesser of a person. It just means I'm not able to meet them where they're at. And I can do so with grace and humility. Maybe I want to meet them there, but I can't, right? But that doesn't still make me a lesser person. So I would say, like, what's within my control is focusing on, building my own self-worth, building my confidence, developing the skills to um, interact with other people in like loving and kind ways, and being loving and kind to myself when bad crap happens, right? And like I can't do anything about it. A lot of my life, there's been a lot of situations with my family dynamics and things that were totally outside of my control. And I put my focus elsewhere. Like I focused on taking care of me. I focused on school at certain points in my life. I focused on work. But I've always had to come back to, focusing on taking care of myself to make sure that like, right, I'm feeling what I need to feel about this crappy situation and then moving forward. So I think, I think it just, yeah, it's a learned skill. I want to emphasize that for anybody who's listening. It is a learned skill. It's not impossible, but it does start with baby steps. And like it sucks that there's no magical pill for that or like magical solution. But it comes with time and practice.
Yeah,
So
it does. I think it's just something that you just have to keep going, keep trying, keep finding your ways to bring yourself back to that present moment. Particularly when you figure out also what is actually causing you to not have that focus as well, because there's different reasons as well, isn't there? Like sometimes you might
right.
be having better sleep, for example, in which case you're finding it easier to deal with the emotions because you're well rested. But like in the case of, for example, where you're not having good sleep or you're like struggling with other areas of your life, like that's when this really goes out the window, right? What are some of the other things
Right.
that maybe cause people to lose the ability to actually train their brain and focus?
Yeah, so I guess there's like two different aspects here. There's the aspect of just like everyday things that affect our ability to focus on whatever it is that we need to focus on, whether that's being aware of what's happening internally with ourselves or to focus on whatever task is at hand. This applies to both things, right? So there's the everyday things that affect our focus versus like if we have more severe mental health issues that are going to impair and affect our ability to focus. But like, when it comes to, why we struggle to focus in general, there are pretty common habits and factors that impact this. And this is usually like we have a lot of distraction happening. So like maybe you're on social media too much, you're watching too much TV and these are just outside factors that are distracting us. We're getting insufficient sleep, insufficient physical activity. We have poor eating habits. What we eat really influences our mental capacity to focus on the things around us. Other environmental factors like sounds, smells, temperature, like visual clutter. Like I'm definitely someone, if my space is cluttered, I cannot focus. It's very hard for me. And then the last factor is like our mental health. Like if we are struggling with that with our levels of our mental health, that it will additionally affect our ability to focus even more. Um, for me, like I've gotten it's taken time and practice to get really good about like my physical activity routines and I'm pretty good about like my diet and nutrition but like yeah, there are things with sometimes my sleep gets messed up and I struggle to show up to work and do my business and focus for a day and it's very frustrating, but like it's taken time for me to be aware of like, okay, this is what's happening and why I'm not able to focus. What about you?
Yeah, I have the same. I think if I haven't slept, if my sleep's off, I'm a useless person. Um,
Yeah.
also,
Yeah.
I'm very, very easily distracted. Like, I can be having a conversation with someone and then a bird walks past and I'm like, oh, a bird. Like, it's
Squirrel.
literally, I'm so like, and it's not because I'm not paying attention. Like I'm very good at like listening and like understanding what's going on with this person. But it's just like something will happen and I'll be like, oh, and then I can zone straight back in. Like it's
Yeah.
a weird one. But I think yeah, I think external distractions, insufficient sleep for me. I would say like the eating habits and the exercise thing go hand in hand, because when I am in my really good, brilliant exercise routine, my eating is better, but otherwise it generally does fall off the wayside. But I don't know how much of an impact that has on my focus. I think that that's more like how much of an impact that has on my mental health, which then impacts the
Then,
focus.
yeah.
But I think the one that really is a thing for me, and I don't necessarily know the science behind this, but the time of the month that I'm on in
Oh,
my
yeah.
period cycle, I think that really, really impacts me. Like, I actually generally the week before my period starts is where I just everything goes to shit. My mental
Yep.
health and focus, like everything starts to distract me, and also maybe the week after my period. And I know that there's different like phases that you go through. We could probably do a different episode on this with someone that actually knows what we're talking about when it comes to periods. But that definitely for me, like the different luteal phases that you go into is definitely 100% impacts me and my ability
Same.
to.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I think it has to do with your hormone levels. So because I've researched a lot of it for myself, but I can never remember. It's not like I studied it to know like our estrogen is low during this period and our testosterone is low. I think it's progesterone is particularly, I can't remember if it's low or high, like right before your period, but a lot of that affects your mood, your concentration, your ability to focus. I mean, I know dudes got it hard, but man, women got it hard too. I actually just saw I saw a new stat because like a lot of research in the past has been on it's typically on men, right? Like when they're doing testing on anything, it's done on male participants. But for sleep research, they're coming out now that like they find, right, the standard number is 8 hours, but that's based around men and their sleeping patterns, and for women, we're closer to 9 hours and then upwards of, like, 10 when we're in particular phases of our period, and that, like, that's what our body needs. Our body needs between 9 and 10 hours of sleep typically compared to our male counterparts, which I think is just wild, but, like, yeah, all of that can affect our ability to focus, and like you said, some of it contributes more into like the mental health, but then which then like feedbacks into the ability to focus and concentrate on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think there's also like other things that play into it, isn't there? Like if you've got like specific mental health issues that you struggle with, like ADHD, OCD, PTSD, for example, all of those are also going to feed into your ability to focus. Now, I've not been diagnosed with ADHD, but for sure I have some tendencies that I would resonate with
Yeah.
from if you were to describe it. And I know that there's like been a whole epidemic in women, particularly millennial women, being
Yeah.
diagnosed with ADHD that went unnoticed, like when we were kids, for example. Um, but I can definitely resonate with the symptom of hyper focus or nothing at all, like the one or the
Yeah.
other. And the crazy spontaneous decisions, probably if you know what my lifestyle is,
Yes.
you'll probably get that. I actually had quite a few people message me sometimes and be like, do you have ADHD? Because like from the way that I present myself on my social media, for example, like the way that people can see that I
Yeah.
structure my life, or like the way that I work, it would make sense if I did. Like I don't know, and I would never say that I do because I've not had a formal diagnosis of it, but I can definitely relate to some of those symptoms. And I know you've said previously, but yours are slightly different in the ones that present to you, right?
Yeah, so I think like I'm not formally diagnosed with ADHD, and I think that I do have some symptoms, but it's very much so it's like on the low level side, and like I think in life and with my experiences, I've learned to really compensate for those things. So like now, like you just, it would never present in that way. But like I used to be really bad in the sense, like if I had nothing all morning and I had a meeting at 2 o'clock, I wouldn't be able to, I would freeze. I wouldn't be able to focus on anything. I wouldn't be able to do anything. Like I wouldn't be able to get my brain going to do anything before that meeting. All I needed to do was be prepared and to sit and wait for that meeting at 2 o'clock. And it would be like a waste of my day. But I think, right, so like the different ways mental health issues disrupt our ability to focus. I know commonly for ADHD, especially with adults, it's where ADHD makes it hard to choose just one thing to concentrate on at a time. For example, depression slows our processing speed, which then creates like brain fog and zaps our like desire to attend and like stay concentrated on one thing. OCD and anxiety disorders can cause like ruminating. And I know I've used this term before. Ruminating is where we're like constantly like ruminating or focused on one past thing over and over again. And so we're like hyper focusing on a single worry or fear. um PTSD like creates the hypervigilance where you like jump easily from danger, like or perceived danger, and that in and of itself severely limits our ability to like focus because we're so focused on like, oh my god, do I have to respond to this dangerous situation? um but I know for like, I mean, for me, because I'm an anxious person, like I have a hard time, like I get hyper focused on things and I can't pivot out of it. And so I recognize for me, sometimes if I'm stuck in that, I have to completely shift to something totally low level in a different category. Like if I'm having a hard time focusing on this task and doing this, it's not going to help. It's not going to help me to sit here and try to focus more on it. I kind of have to like shift and I have to like do another task or distract, listen to music or watch an episode of something because then that'll give my brain like a little bit of a reset and be like, okay, now let me try again. Because I was like kind of stuck before in my like hyper focus of worries or fears on other things. So, I mean,
No,
it's different for everybody.
I agree with that. Like when I'm in that hyper focus state, I can like go for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours without break. Like I can literally just go wild with like the work that I'm doing and get so much stuff done. But when I'm in that point where it's like I'm staring at a screen, the words are jumbling up on the screen, like I can't get my mind into one thing. I flip between the tabs that I'm on, like maybe do a tiny little bit here, a tiny little bit there, but not really achieve anything that I want to achieve. I've started to recognize that behavior in myself and say, right, so now's not your time. Like you're not you're not in the right mindset for whatever reason to focus right now. Give yourself a break, go away, do something else, and then see if you can come back to it later
Yeah.
and then get yourself into that hyper fixed state. I think it's also about like that self-awareness and like understanding when you're in those mindsets and that you need to allow yourself give yourself a slap to take a step back, because what's the point in you sitting at
Yep.
your laptop trying to do something if your brain just isn't there in that moment with you? Now, I think what has really played a difference in my life in being able to cope and manage with that is understanding the needs to do's versus the wants to do's.
Yeah.
And knowing like when something is actually urgent or when you're like trying to catastrophize that something's urgent, because actually in my brain nothing, like I remember when I was in work, when I used to work for companies, like when I was fire and stuff, I would say nothing is urgent unless it's affecting somebody's health. Like unless, like if you're telling me, for example, people used to be like, oh, tomorrow's the deadline to send your buy orders. I'm like, okay, well, is that an emergency really? It's like is it gonna impact somebody's health if I don't send those orders? No, it's just gonna
Right.
affect our delivery on our product, which
Yeah.
somebody is gonna buy sooner or rather than later anyway. So it's like,
Yeah.
you don't need to make something urgent that isn't actually urgent, because then that just like increases your inability to focus, because you're like struck, like you're then veering off into like the possibilities of what may or may not happen if you don't do it. So I think
Right.
it's also recognizing like what needs to be done versus what you want to be done. That has really been a game changer for me in changing my mindset when it comes to focus. And if there's something that you really do need to be done, figuring out your way of getting better at focusing. Like for me, it's making sure that I have that morning routine. That
Yeah.
helps me set myself up for the day. And also using things like the Pomodoro method, for example, to say, right, you need to work right now for 45 minutes, and then you can take a break. But that 45 minutes, put your phone in another room, just
Right.
focus on one thing, not like 10 million things that are on my to-do list, just the one thing
Right.
that you need to do right now that is urgent. Close all of the other tabs on your laptop and just do that one thing. And I think that
Yep.
that's really, like, I now know the difference between like, okay, this isn't important right now. It might be important tomorrow, but it's not right now. And I can really like zone in and focus on that bit of work rather than trying to focus on everything that I might need to want to do, but actually it's not actually urgent in that moment. Have you found any ways of for yourself like to manage that better?
Oh yeah. I mean, this is a lot of what I coach my clients on actually. Like there I feel like it's a pandemic of people not being able to truly prioritize and properly organize tasks that are just like on our plate as human beings, whether it's like with our personal life or in our business or in your work, whatever it is that you're doing. But like you hit the nail on the head. Like it's about learning how to prioritize what is urgent and important, then like the whole Eisenhower matrix, right? Like what is important and urgent versus what's just important but not urgent, or what's urgent but not important, and like how to break, or what's not important or urgent at all, and how do you get that off of your list? Like how do you break these things down? And then how do you present? This is the biggest thing I see with my clients and even myself. When you do like a to-do list and things, most of us have like this running master list that we just go and we look at and we're trying to pluck things off of. But visually, again, right? Reticular activating system. What we're looking at, what we're focusing on, and we're filtering into our brain is we're seeing this massive list of to dos, which can lead to increased anxiety, can lead to pushing up our cortisol levels, and like where we get stressed out, like, oh crap, I have all of this that I have to do. And it deters our ability to just focus on the priority items that we need to do. So, like, I always recommend to my clients, I'm like, you have a master list, but that is not the list that you use every day. You pull from that master list and you have your top 3 to-dos, that is what you focus on for the day. Like, that is what you kind of streamline a prioritization. And it makes a huge difference. Like, when I show up to my priority to-do list and I have 10 things on there, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know where to I'm already starting off with this, like, heightened feeling, and I don't like it doesn't help me feel like I'm in a calm centered place of what do I address first and how do I take action and focus on one thing and move on to the next. So I mean, you hit the nail on the head with a lot of it, and I think, right, if you want to focus better, then you need to regularly put practices in your life that support your reticular activating system and what you're choosing to focus on, but also practices that help you recognize what is going to support you, like what you need to do. It's a learned skill. Are you someone that maybe does better with exercise in the morning versus the afternoon because it kind of like clears out your energy levels and it makes you good to go to sit down and do work? Are you someone who, you need alarms to help you and like sit down to do something like a Pomodoro method, or just to say, like, I need an alarm to signal I've done an hour and a half of work. Now I can get up and like go for a walk and move my body, right? Or do I need to adjust how I'm writing down my to dos and my tasks? Like, what do I need to be aware of in terms of my emotions to know, oh, I'm functioning from this emotional place today. So I need to do this first to like handle my shit. And then I can move on to focusing. Or maybe today is just a decompression day. And I know sadly our society is not set up to have that flexibility for you. Um, which, is a big burr in my boot. Like our society is not supporting people to actually thrive and be resilient in the face of everyday stress. It's very not that there's anything wrong with consumerism or anything like that and running a business, but we are very driven to make money, produce money, and like this is how you survive. And people are barely doing that because that's not all that like makes up living. So it's about how can you be mindful of these small little practices that you can include for yourself in the day, right? Like, can you engage in a little bit of body movement? Can you do a daily exercise that is like practicing concentration and focus that is not with your phone, right? Like, can you practice mindfulness? Like, there's a crap ton of research that's coming out around mindfulness, and practicing doing mindfulness meditation is hard, like really, really hard, which is why I always recommend doing breath work because it's a different form of mindfulness, but like whereas you're focused on a different activity versus like just letting your thoughts pass. But like it is a learned skill that you have to practice. Um, and then just for like some really quick, like I've learned these from working in the psych field, immediate focus shifting techniques like running your wrists under cold water or putting your face into cold water. Um, I'm not remembering this one correctly. I can't remember if it's that you I think you hum while you walk backwards because it triggers your vagus nerve, which helps to kind of like ground you. And I believe it's humming while walking backwards is the one. Another one is like the five senses technique where it's like you're really this is especially if you're kind of totally dissociated, you're not really like able to focus on anything. You'd be like, okay, what are five things that I can see, four things that I can touch, three things that I can hear, two things that I can smell, one thing that I can taste, right? These are like immediate grounding techniques to get you in the moment, which will then help you shift your focus to, okay, what can I do that would be more helpful for me right now?
Yeah, for sure. I think the one that I now am better at, because like going back to like us training our brains to be able to do these things, right? So the
Right.
Vipassana, not Vipassana, the mindfulness meditation, um, I am now very good at. But like if you'd have asked me to meditate 5 years ago, I would have laughed in your face. But that's because it has been a muscle that I've actively trained and taught myself how to do. Now, I don't
Mhm.
necessarily use that as a coping mechanism. I just use that as a practice that I incorporate into my routine. But definitely, like some of those things, like you really do need to practice them to be able to better improve your ability to
Yeah.
focus. And something else that I've been trying to do as well is like the past few weeks I've really struggled with focus, like massively. And like we spoke about in a previous episode, I was procrastinating loads and like scroll holing and all of that. So this weekend just gone, for example, I made the conscious decision to delete all of social media from my phone. Now that's not necessarily practical because I have businesses that I need to run and I need to run social medias, but I have found an alternative way of using that through Business Suite. So I don't need to scroll. I literally just need to go on there, upload the thing that I need to upload, off I come. Go on there, reply to the
Mm-hmm.
message that I need to reply to, off I go. So that has been and I can sense this week, since I did that, my focus is completely changed. And
Yeah.
the other thing that I've been doing is like instead of like for the first few days I would go on and naturally try and click on Instagram, right? And like I wouldn't be able to get on it because I've logged out. So
Right.
instead, I needed somewhere to go and focus my attention, because in that moment I clearly needed something to do, to just like be mind numbing to my
Distract.
brain. Instead, I'm learning Spanish because I'm in South America at the moment. My Spanish is crap, trying to improve it. I've been going onto the Duolingo app, and instead of like me
We should be
scrolling,
friends on there.
yeah, instead of me scrolling, I'm going on there and I'm doing a lesson on Duolingo, which is not only like
Right.
helping me develop in Spanish, it's actually productive with my use of my time. It's brain training. I'm actually doing something
Right.
that's requiring a little bit of
Yeah.
thought. It's not just like mind numbing, but it still is just it's still a distraction of some sort, because it's still taking me away
Right.
from my thing, but it's still like actually strengthening my brain in a way. It's
Yep.
still in the muscle. So I would really suggest, if like you do struggle with scroll holding, is that procrastination and that thing that takes you away from like the thing that you're focusing on, try and find an alternative that's like still activating the mind muscle in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny because I've been in the same spot this last week. I'm like, do I delete my social media? Like I need to get off of it right now. I'm pretty good about like for me, I actually don't like scroll hole a lot while I'm working. I just like I can tell I just get sporadic with the work that I'm doing on my laptop. But I can tell at night when I need to shut down and decompress, instead of doing that, I get into a scroll hole and then I start scrolling and it's like, no, I could be doing other things that would be more beneficial for me to shut down and decompress, which would then help my focus the next day, instead of going from screen to screen to screen. So I feel you on that, but, I think I don't know, we covered a lot of good things. I hope that whatever we shared for people was, helpful and it gives you some ideas about how you can learn to cultivate a little bit more focus for yourself, and being aware of like where you're at with your emotions and what are the practices you need to put in place so that you can get a little bit better with this. My last friendly reminder is that it is all a step-by-step journey, and it's not something that's going to happen overnight, but like it's not impossible. And it's definitely, I would say personally, just from my own experiences, and I think also just to speak a little for Sophie, is that it helps. It works a lot and it makes a difference. Like I'm a very different person than I was several years ago. And a lot of it comes from putting these practices in place to help me learn how to manage myself and, focus my energy where I want, or yeah, but like do my focus to where I want my energy to go, basically. So yeah, I don't know if you have any closing stuff, Sophie, or
No, only that I actually listened to a podcast recently from a podcast guy that I really like called The Mindset Mentor, and he
Mhm.
gave some extra tips that I've forgotten naturally because I probably wasn't 100% focused whilst I was listening to the podcast episode. But he gave some extra tips that I'm going to link in the show notes because that was a really good episode. If someone is struggling with focus, that was actually a really good episode to go back and listen to as well, because he gave some really practical little things that you can do. But otherwise, thanks for listening to our episode today. If this resonated with you, be sure to give us a like, and we'd love to hear your feedback in the comments about what topics you'd like to hear more about. Don't forget to subscribe, follow us on socials, and join the community at timesnothidden.com. All of the details can be found in the episode description below. And remember, until next time, you've got this.